Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a file on a man who is, I think it's fair to say, the architect of the way we speak.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially about grief, about loss, and heroism in, well, in the English language.
He really is.
If you grew up speaking English, I guarantee this man's words are rattling around in your head whether you even realize it or not.
Yeah.
We're talking about Alfred, Lord Tennyson.
The giant is usually the word that comes to mind. You really can't talk about the Victorian era or, the whole mindset of the 19th century without putting Tennyson dead center.
Right at the middle of it.
He is the sun that everything else orbited around for about 50 years, seriously.
And that's what struck me looking at the research stack you sent over. We usually think of the Victorian era as this buttoned up, stiff upper lip period.
Very proper, very repressed.
Exactly. But when you look at Tennyson, the guy who literally defined the voice of that era, he is chaotic.
He's a mess.
He's messy. He's deeply clinically depressed for huge chunks of his life. He's obsessed with the sound of words to a degree that, and I found this fascinating, some of his contemporaries thought was actually a symptom of mental illness.
It is a massive contradiction, and that is what makes him so fun to analyze. You have the public figure, the bearded sage, the establishment guy who was Poet Laureate for over 40 years.
42 years, I think.
But underneath that laurel wreath, he was just this raw, exposed nerve of a human being.
Okay, so before we get into the messiness, and I really want to get into the wood carving scheme, because that just blew my mind.
Oh, the wood carving, yeah.
I want to prove to you, the listener, just how embedded this guy is. You pulled a stat from the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations.
I did. He is the 9th most frequently quoted writer in the entire dictionary.
That is wild. Top 10 all time.
All time.
That puts him up there with Shakespeare and the Bible.
And Pope.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, people quote him constantly without knowing it's him.
It's just in the air.
His words have just seeped into the groundwater. It's incredible.
Give us the greatest hits. I want to see if I can recognize them without knowing the source.
Okay, well, the big one, obviously, you see this on Instagram, you hear it in rom-coms. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Okay, yes. I feel like I see that cross-stitched on pillows. That's Tennyson.
That is Tennyson. And usually people use it in the context of, a breakup. Oh, well, at least I dated him.
Sure.
But when you find out why he wrote it and who he was writing it for, it takes on this much heavier, darker meaning. It's not about a breakup. It's about death.
We're definitely going to unpack that.
Okay.
What else?
If you talk about the military or corporate duty or even just a bad boss, you know this one. There's not to reason why. There's but to do and die.
The Charge of the Light Brigade, of course.
Exactly. A poem about a complete military blunder that somehow became an anthem for bravery. It's a neat trick.
That's amazing.
And then if you look at how we talk about nature or evolution, there's the phrase, nature red in tooth and claw.
Wait, red in tooth and claw is Tennyson? I honestly thought that was Charles Darwin.
Everyone thinks that.
Or maybe, like, a tagline for a nature documentary.
It sounds so scientific, doesn't it? But Tennyson actually wrote that before Darwin published The Origin of Species.
No way.
Yes, he was already wrestling with the brutality of nature, this idea that nature is a violence machine, before the science even fully caught up.
Okay, so that sets the stakes.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about a guy who wrote some rhymes in a dusty library. We are talking about the source code for a lot of our modern idioms.
That's a great way to put it, source code.
But the mission for this deep dive is to move past the quotes. I want to understand the guy, because the stack of notes we have, biographies, letters, analysis, it paints a picture of someone who is, well, weird might be the wrong word, but certainly intense.
Intense is definitely the right word. Hypersensitive is another one. We have notes here on his time in the House of Lords, his wax cylinder voice recordings, which is a creepy story in itself.
I can't wait for that.
And his waking trances.
The trances. That was the part of the research that made me stop and just say, okay, this isn't what I expected from a Victorian gentleman.
No, it's fascinating stuff. It borders on the psychedelic, really.
So let's peel this back. To understand the man, we have to start at the beginning. And usually when we do these deep dives, the childhood is just a preamble. Born here, went to school there.
It's just setting the stage.
But with Tennyson, it feels like the childhood is the whole engine of the story. If you don't understand the house he grew up in, you don't understand the poetry at all.
Absolutely. You cannot understand Alfred Tennyson without understanding the Somersby Rectory and the shadow that hung over it.
Let's go to Somersby, Lincolnshire, 1809.
August 6, 1809. That's the birth date.
And on paper, looking at the census or whatever, this looks like a pretty standard setup. Successful middle-class family, dad's a clergyman, lots of kids running around. It sounds like the setting of a Jane Austen novel.
Right.
Bit pastoral, bit cozy.
It looks like a Jane Austen novel on the outside, maybe Pride and Prejudice, but inside it was more like Wuthering Heights or a gothic horror story.
Why?
Really?
What's the dynamic? Because they had money, right? They were descended from earls or something.
They had the blood, but the money is where the trauma starts. It all centers on his father, George Clayton Tennyson.
Okay.
Now, George was the eldest son of a very wealthy landowner and lawyer, also named George Tennyson. By all the laws of English tradition, specifically primogeniture, George, Alfred's father, should have inherited everything. The land, the money, the power, the whole estate.
Primogeniture is that firstborn takes all rule, right?
Right.
It's the rule that drives the plot of, Succession in Game of Thrones.
Correct. It keeps the estate intact.
Yeah.
But George didn't get it.
Why not? Was he illegitimate or something?
Nope, he was legitimate. But his father, so Alfred's grandfather, who was known as the Old Man of the Wolds, decided he simply didn't like George very much.
You didn't like him.
He favored the younger brother, Charles. So the grandfather orchestrates this massive betrayal. He passes over George, the rightful heir, and gives the entire fortune and the estates to the younger brother, Charles.
That is brutal. So George is just cut out. Sorry, I like your brother better.
Effectively, yes. And it gets worse. Because George was a man of, they said, superior abilities.
Okay.
The records show he was talented in architecture, painting, music, poetry. He had this real artistic spirit. He probably would have been a great patron of the arts or a gentleman scholar, but because he was disinherited, he had to make a living.
Right. He needed a job.
So he was forced into the church. He became the rector of Somersby, a country clergyman.
So you have a guy who should have been a wealthy landowner, who has the soul of an artist, and he's forced to be a small-town preacher while his little brother lives in the family castle, literally the family castle down the road.
Precisely. And that injustice didn't just annoy him, it broke him. It festered. The atmosphere in the Somersby rectory was thick with bitterness. The father was an alcoholic, prone to black moods, fits of rage, and then these periods of total despondency.
So he was unstable.
Very. He felt cheated by the universe. He felt the world was fundamentally unfair.
And Alfred is growing up right in the middle of this.
He's soaking it all in. The family was comfortably well off in the sense that they weren't starving. They could afford summer holidays to the coast at Mablethorpe and Skegness.
Okay, so not poor, but...
But the psychological weight was crushing. Tennyson later called it the black blood of the Tennysons. He was terrified for his whole life that he had inherited this melancholia, this mental instability from his father.
It sounds like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
But here's the twist that I found interesting in the notes. Despite the dad being so bitter and having these black moods, he was actually a really good teacher, wasn't he?
He was.
He didn't check out on the kids.
He didn't. That's the complexity of the man. George poured all that artistic energy, however frustrated it was, into his children. He built a massive library in the rectory. He drilled them in the classics, Virgil, Horace, Homer.
So he was very involved in their education.
Deeply. And it wasn't just Alfred. The literary talent in that house was just overflowing. Alfred had two brothers, Charles and Frederick, and they were all writing poetry in their teens.
I saw that note. They published a book together.
They did. Poems by two brothers. Alfred was only 17.
17.
It was actually poems by three brothers. Frederick contributed a few, but they titled it Two Brothers.
17 years old and publishing a collection of poetry. That is precocious. I was playing video games at 17.
It is. And it shows they were just desperate to escape that house, to make a mark. They were looking for an outlet, and they were looking up to Lord Byron.
Byron was the rock star of the day.
The ultimate idol for a brooding, unhappy teenager. Byron represented rebellion, dark romance, the anti-hero. Tennyson later recalled that as a boy, he was an enormous admirer of Byron.
I bet.
When Byron died in Greece in 1824, Tennyson, who was just 15, went out into the woods and carved Byron as dead into a sandstone rock.
That is the most emo thing I have ever heard.
Yeah.
Carving Byron is dead into a rock.
It just shows how deeply he felt things, doesn't it? He was devastated. You can see that romantic, dark, Byronic influence all over his early work. He was trying to channel that same intensity.
So we have the environment, dark, intellectual, high pressure, bitter. But then there's this internal thing, this waking trance I mentioned earlier. Can you walk me through this? Because this comes from a psychology textbook, not a literary one.
Right, this is cited in William James's classic, The Varieties of Religious Experience. James, who's basically the father of American psychology, uses Tennyson as a case study for mystical experiences.
What was happening to him? Was he having seizures?
No, it was self-induced. Tennyson describes it as something that started when he was a boy, usually when he was all alone in that very crowded house.
Yeah.
He would start repeating his own name. Alfred, Alfred, Alfred. Just saying it over and over again, softly to himself.
Okay, I've done that as a kid. You say a word enough times and it starts to sound like nonsense. It's called semantic satiation.
Right, but for Tennyson, it went further than just the word losing meaning. He said that as he did it, individuality itself seemed to dissolve and fade away into boundless being.
Boundless being. That sounds like a trip. Like ego death.
It does. It sounds like something you'd hear from a Zen monk or someone on psychedelics, but he was very specific about it. He insisted this wasn't a hallucination or a state of confusion. He called it the clearest, the surest of the sure, utterly beyond words.
Wow.
It was like he was hacking his own brain to bypass his ego and touch something infinite.
So why does this matter for us reading his poetry? Is it just a cool anecdote, or does it change the work?
It matters because it explains his obsession with sound. Think about how he got there. By repeating a word, by the rhythm, the chant. Tennyson's poetry is famous for its musicality, its rhythm.
Right.
He wasn't just writing for the page, he was writing for the ear. He was trying to use the sound of words to induce that same kind of trance in the reader.
So when we read him, we're supposed to feel that rhythm.
Yes, he's an auditory poet. He's trying to dissolve the boundaries of the self through rhythm. He was a mystic who happened to write poetry. If you read his poems out loud, which you absolutely should, you start to feel that hypnotic quality.
That completely changes how I view him. He's not just observing nature. He's trying to break through reality. Okay, so he survives the childhood, he has these mystical experiences, and finally he gets to escape. He leaves the rectory.
He heads to university, Trinity College, Cambridge, in 1827.
And this is where the world just opens up for him.
It's a total transformation. He leaves the toxic, isolated atmosphere of Somersby and steps into the center of intellectual life. He's big, he was over 6 feet tall, he's handsome, he's brilliant, and he gets tapped for a secret society.
The Cambridge Apostles.
Yeah.
Which is just a cool name. It sounds like a conspiracy thriller.
It was an exclusive debating club. The absolute brightest minds of the generation. They would meet to eat sardines, drink coffee, and debate the nature of God and the universe. And it was there, in that circle, that he met the most important person in his life.
Arthur Hallam.
Arthur Henry Hallam.
Now, we need to pause on Hallam, because usually in these stories, in biopics, in movies, the most important relationship is a romance. It's a wife, or a lover, or a muse.
Sure.
But with Tennyson, it's this guy, Arthur Hallam. Who was he?
Hallam was everything Tennyson wasn't. Tennyson was shy, gruff, messy, socially awkward, carrying all that baggage from his father. Hallam was the golden boy. He was charismatic, articulate, the life of the party. He was widely considered the most promising young man of his generation.
Really?
Everyone thought Hallam was going to be prime minister one day.
And they just clicked.
Instant connection, they became inseparable. Hallam was the first person to really look at Tennyson's poetry and say, "You are a genius. You are the poet we've been waiting for." He validated it.
He was his champion.
He was. And the bond got even deeper because Hallam went home with Tennyson to Somersby and fell in love with Tennyson's sister, Amelia.
Oh, wow. So they were literally going to be brothers.
They were engaged. So Hallam is his best friend, his artistic champion, his intellectual equal, and his future brother-in-law. Tennyson's life finally looks like it's on track. He wins the Chancellor's Gold Medal for a poem called Timbuktu.
Timbuktu. The city in Mali.
Yes. It was the subject set for the prize that year. Tennyson reworked an old poem he had written about Armageddon, slapped the title Timbuktu on it, and won.
That's resourceful.
It was considered no slight honor for a 20-year-old. Then, in 1830, he publishes his first real solo book, Poems, chiefly lyrical. It's got Clarabelle and Mariana in it. He's rising.
It feels like the start of a great career. The trajectory is pointing straight up, and then we hit 1833.
The pivot point.
This year seems like a disaster on every single level. It's like the universe just decided to humble him.
It starts with professional failure. He releases his second book. This one has the first version of The Lady of Shalott, which we now think of as a masterpiece.
An absolute classic.
It's iconic, but the critics at the time didn't think so.
What happened?
They shredded it. One reviewer called it drivel. They mocked his affectations. And you have to remember, Tennyson had that thin skin from his father.
Right, he was hypersensitive.
He took criticism incredibly personally. He was so hurt by the reviews that he effectively went silent. He didn't publish another book for 10 years.
10 years? That's a career ender for most people. He just took his ball and went home.
He kept writing. In fact, he wrote more than ever, but he refused to publish. He went into a shell.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give the critics more ammunition. But the reviews, they were nothing compared to what happened next.
The tragedy.
Arthur Hallam was in Vienna. He was on holiday with his father. He was only 22 years old, perfectly healthy, and one afternoon he just died.
Just like that. No warning.
A sudden cerebral hemorrhage. A stroke. He went to take a nap on the sofa and never woke up. His father came in and thought he was sleeping.
I can't even imagine that phone call, or I guess that letter, since it's 1833. You're young, you think you have forever, and your anchor, the guy who believes in you more than anyone, is just gone.
It completely shattered Tennyson. The sources say the effect was profound, but that's a huge understatement. It broke him. He lost his best friend, his confidant, and his link to the world.
And his future brother-in-law.
Exactly. And because Hallam was engaged to Amelia, the whole family was plunged into mourning. It wasn't just losing a friend, it was losing a future.
And this is where the deep dive really gets interesting. Because most people would crumble. And Tennyson did crumble. But what did he do with the pieces?
He stopped publishing, but he started writing furiously. He used the grief as fuel. This is when he starts writing the elegies that would eventually become an memoriam. He wrote, "In the Valley of Cauderetz."
So it's like the grief unlocked a new level of depth in him.
Exactly. Before this, his poetry was beautiful, melodic, but maybe a little decorative, a little bit art for art's sake. After Hallam dies, it becomes real. It becomes a desperate search for meaning. He's asking, where did my friend go? Does the universe make any sense?
So he's in this wilderness period. His friend is dead. He's not publishing. He's just drifting. But then it gets weirder. He makes some really, really bad decisions, right? This is the part I've been waiting for.
He really does. This is the part of the biography that usually gets skipped in English class because it doesn't fit the wise poet narrative.
Of course not.
The family eventually gets kicked out of the Somersby Rectory because the father dies, and a new rector needs the house. They move to Epping Forest around 1837, and Tennyson befriends a guy named Dr. Allen.
Dr. Allen, who ran an asylum?
Yes, a nearby asylum. Matthew Allen. He was a charismatic talker, a bit of a schemer, and Dr. Allen had a surefire business idea.
Uh-oh.
He pitched Tennyson on a startup.
Please tell me what the startup was.
Ecclesiastical wood carving.
I'm sorry.
Using a new machine, a pyroglyph, to carve fancy wood decorations for churches and homes, like automated manufacturing of Gothic wood panels.
That was the pitch. We're going to disrupt the church wood carving industry with steam power.
That was the pitch. And Tennyson, who was desperate for money to support his mother and siblings, and who probably wanted to secure his future so he could marry, went all in.
Oh, no.
He sold his small patrimony. He invested the family fortune.
This is a train wreck in slow motion.
It is. Dr. Allen didn't really have the technology worked out. The business model was flawed, and you can guess what happened.
You think?
It was a total disaster. The unwise investment wiped them out. The family lost nearly everything. Tennyson was humiliated. So now look at the scoreboard. His best friend is dead.
Well,
the critics hate him. He hasn't published in years. And he just lost all his money on a wood carving scheme.
he hit rock bottom.
He fell into a serious clinical depression. He actually had to go into a hydropathic establishment, like a water cure sanitarium, to recover. He was physically ill from the stress.
It's incredible that he survived this. I mean, honestly, looking at that list of failures, most people would just check out. But this brings us to the comeback, 1842.
The turning point. He finally decides to face the public again. He needs money, and he knows the only thing he can actually do is write. He publishes the 2-volume poems.
Okay.
Volume 1 is the old stuff, heavily revised, because he's been obsessively editing for 10 years. Volume 2 is the new stuff.
And this time?
Immediate success. The critics had changed. The public taste had changed. This is the volume that has the heavy hitters. Locksley Hall, Break, Break, Break. And, crucially, Ulysses.
We have to talk about Ulysses because that poem, I mean, Judi Dench quotes it in Skyfall. It's the ultimate never give up anthem.
It is, but knowing what we know now, knowing about the wood carving, the depression, the death of Hallam, listen to the context. He wrote Ulysses shortly after Hallam died.
So it's not about a Greek hero.
It is about Odysseus, the Greek hero. The poem imagines him as an old man back home after the Trojan War. He's bored. He's sitting by the hearth among these barren crags, and he realizes he can't just rot there. He has to go back to sea. He has to do something before he dies.
But really, it's Tennyson talking to himself.
Exactly. The famous last lines, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
When you read that on a motivational poster, it sounds triumphant, like a guy winning a marathon or
So
something.
when you realize Tennyson wrote it while he was suicidal, broke, and grieving, it's not a victory lap, it's a survival strategy. He is screaming at himself, do not yield.
Wow.
He is forcing himself to get out of bed.
That gives me chills. It changes it from a slogan into a lifeline. I am in hell, but I am going to keep walking.
Precisely, and the Victorian public loved it. They needed that resilience. The Industrial Revolution was happening, the world was changing so fast, and people felt unmoored. Tennyson gave them a voice that said, it's okay to struggle as long as you keep moving.
So he's back. He's famous. But he's not quite at the top yet. That happens in 1850, the golden year.
1850 is arguably the best year any writer has ever had in history. 3 massive life events happen almost at once. It's his annus mirabilis, his miracle year.
Break it down for us. What happens?
First, the personal. He gets married, finally.
To Emily Selwood.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is a whole romance saga in itself. They'd known each other for years. They were engaged way back. But then the engagement was broken off because Tennyson was too poor.
Thanks to the woodcarving disaster.
Exactly. And her father forbade the marriage. He didn't want his daughter marrying a penniless poet. But now that Tennyson is selling books and making money, the objection is dropped. They finally tie the knot. He gets the girl.
Check. What's number 2?
The masterpiece. He finally publishes the thing he's been working on for 17 years, In Memoriam AHH.
17 years. That's how long he worked on it.
It's a collection of 133 separate poems, or cantos, all elegies for Hallam. He wrote them piece by piece over nearly 2 decades. It's not just a poem, it's a diary of grief.
A diary.
It tracks his journey from the moment Hallam died. Total despair, shock through the anger, the doubt about God, the seasonal cycles of memory, and finally to acceptance and hope.
That's a long time to live with a ghost.
It is. But when it was published, anonymously at first, it was a sensation. It became the most popular book of the era besides the Bible. Everyone who had lost someone read it. It was like a manual for how to grieve.
And number 3.
The promotion. William Wordsworth, the old poet laureate, dies in 1850. The job opens up. It's the highest honor a poet can get in Britain.
Who picks the poet laureate? The Queen.
Technically, the Prime Minister advises the monarch. They offered it to Samuel Rogers first. He was a wealthy banker poet, but he was ancient, 87 years old. He said, I'm too old to do the work.
Fair enough.
So they had to look for the next best option. Prince Albert, the Queen's husband, was a fan of Tennyson. So Alfred Tennyson was appointed Poet Laureate of United Kingdom.
Talk about a good year. Married, published his magnum opus, and gets the top job in poetry with a government salary. And just like that, the disinherited boy from the toxic rectory becomes the official voice of the British Empire.
It's a complete turnaround. And this wasn't just a government appointment. Queen Victoria herself was an ardent admirer.
Oh, that's right.
And this connection is really interesting. We tend to think of the Queen as this distant figure. But remember, later on, in 1861, her husband, Prince Albert, dies.
And she went into mourning for the rest of her life.
Deep, deep mourning. She wore black for 40 years. She barely appeared in public. And what did she read?
In memoriam.
So Tennyson, who spent 17 years grieving Hallam, was the only person who had the language to match her grief.
Precisely. She wrote in her diary that she was much soothed and pleased by reading it. She felt that Tennyson understood her pain when no one else did. They met twice. Her diary entry about their first meeting in 1862 is hilarious.
What did she say?
She describes him as very peculiar-looking, tall, dark, oddly dressed.
Which is Queen speak for, he looked like a mess. He did. He had this long, flowing black hair, a giant unkempt beard. He wore a big slouch hat and a cape. He looked like a wizard or a drifter. He didn't look like a courtier. But she noted there was no affectation.
He wasn't faking it.
He wasn't pretending. He was just him. She found him very elevated and unworldly.
They were grief buddies.
In a way, yes. The Queen and the poet, bonded by loss.
So he holds this job for 42 years, the longest tenure ever. But being laureate isn't just hanging out with the Queen and talking about sadness, right? It's a job. You have to write stuff for the state.
It's a weird job. You're a government employee, essentially. You have to write verses for royal weddings, greetings to visiting princesses, odes for the funerals of generals.
Which brings us to the most famous work assignment in history, the Charge of the Light Brigade.
Written in 1855, the Crimean War.
Talk about threading a needle. Because the actual event, the charge, was a total disaster, wasn't it? It was a screw-up by the generals.
A massive blunder. Due to a miscommunication, the Light Brigade light cavalry was ordered to charge straight into Russian cannons. It was a suicide mission.
A complete catastrophe.
600 men charged, huge casualties. The public was furious at the leadership.
So Tennyson has a problem. He's the Poet Laureate. He can't trash the army or the government. But he also can't pretend it was a great victory because everyone knows 600 guys just got slaughtered for no reason.
So what does he do? He shifts the focus. He focuses entirely on the soldier's duty. There's not to reason why, there's but to do and die.
Right.
He acknowledges the mistake. He explicitly writes someone had blundered. But he frames the obedience of the soldiers as the highest form of bravery.
He separates the warrior from the war.
Exactly. He honors the sacrifice without validating the strategy. It's a masterclass in public relations poetry. And it worked. The poem became definitive. It transformed a military embarrassment into a legend of British stoicism.
I want to pivot back to the craftsman side of him, because you mentioned earlier that he was obsessive. How obsessive were we talking?
Robert Browning, who is another famous poet of the time and a friend of Tennyson, called Tennyson's editing process insane.
Insane.
He said it was a symptom of mental infirmity.
That's harsh. You edit so much you must be crazy.
But it goes back to the waking trance. Tennyson felt the rhythm physically. He wouldn't let a line go until the sound was perfect. He would read lines out loud thousands of times. Take, break, break, break.
That's the poem about the sea, right?
It's about grief, written for Hallam, but he uses the sea to show it. The rhythm is break, break, break. It's a hard, insistent beat. 3 stresses. It mimics the waves crashing against the cold gray stones. He's not telling you he's sad. He's using the rhythm to make you feel the monotony and the physical weight of the sorrow.
It's like a heartbeat, the sad one.
Or take the princess. There's a famous example of onomatopoeia words that sound like what they describe. The moan of doves in immemorial elms and murmuring of innumerable bees.
Murmuring of innumerable bees. You can literally hear the buzzing, the M and Z sounds.
That's onomatopoeia on steroids. He is painting with sound. He wants the listener to be immersed in the sensory experience. And the crazy thing is we can actually hear him doing it.
The wax cylinders. This is the tech part of the story.
Yes. Late in his life, around 1890, this guy, Colonel George Edward Garrod, who was Thomas Edison's agent in Europe, showed up at Tennyson's house with a phonograph.
We have audio of a guy born in 1809.
We do. It's available online. It's incredibly scratchy. It sounds like a ghost shouting through a storm, but you can hear him booming out the Charge of the Light Brigade.
What does he sound like? Does he sound posh?
He sounds ancient. He has this deep, resonant, almost chanting voice. He doesn't read it like a conversation. He chants it. It confirms everything we thought about his focus on rhythm. It's a direct audio link to the Victorian mindset.
That is incredible. I love when technology lets us touch the past like that, but let's look at his mind, not just his voice. Because the Victorian era was a time of massive change. Science is exploding. Geology is proving the Earth is old. Darwin is publishing. The Bible is being questioned. Where did Tennyson stand on all this? Was he a religious conservative?
This is why he's still relevant today. He wasn't a dogmatic conservative, but he wasn't an atheist either. He lived in the tension. He practiced what he called honest doubt.
There lives more faith in honest doubt, believe me, than in half the creeds.
That's the line. He's saying that questioning the universe, wrestling with God, is actually more holy than just blindly following rules because you're told to. He looked at the fossil record, he read books by Charles Lyell on geology, and he saw extinction. He saw that nature wipes out entire species.
And that scared him.
It terrified him. He asked, if nature is this brutal, if species just die out and turn to rock, does God actually care about us, or are we just next on the list?
That's the red in tooth and claw idea.
Right. He stared into the abyss of a godless, violent universe, and he tried to build a bridge of faith across it. He didn't deny the science, he tried to integrate it. By the end of his life, his beliefs were very unique. He leaned toward agnosticism and pandeism.
Pandeism. Break that down for me.
It's the idea that God became the universe, that the divine and the physical are one and the same. On his deathbed, he was quoting Spinoza and Giordano Bruno philosophers, who were considered heretics by the mainstream church.
So the pillar of the establishment, the Queen's favorite poet, was basically a mystic heretic in private.
He was a seeker. He never stopped wrestling with the big questions. He refused to give easy answers.
We should briefly touch on his politics, because for a guy who was so open-minded about the universe, he was kind of elitist about voting, wasn't he?
He was a man of his time and his class. He was a Whig by tradition. He believed in gradual and steady reform, not revolution. He looked at the French Revolution and saw chaos. He didn't want that for England.
So he didn't want everyone to vote.
He was wary of the mob. He thought people should only get the vote once they were educated enough to use it responsibly. He wanted evolution, not revolution.
Gradual reform. It sounds very safe, very establishment.
But he did have his moments of enthusiasm. There's a great story that when the Reform Act of 1832 passed, which was the first big step in giving more people the vote, a young Tennyson and his brothers broke into a local church at night just to ring the bells in celebration.
Breaking and entering for democracy. I like it. It shows he had a pulse.
But eventually he became part of the system. He became a lord.
A reluctant lord.
Very reluctant. Benjamin Disraeli, the prime minister, offered him a baronetcy twice in 1865 and 1868. Tennyson said no both times.
Why? Did he think he was too cool for it?
He just wasn't interested in the pomp. He just wanted to write. But finally, in 1883, William Gladstone, another prime minister and a friend, convinced him to accept a peerage. In 1884, Queen Victoria created him Baron Tennyson of Aldworth and Freshwater. He took his seat in the House of Lords.
The first poet to be raised to the peerage just for being a poet.
Correct. Not because he was a soldier or a politician, but because he wrote poems. It showed just how high his status had risen. He was a national institution. He was the voice of England.
So we've tracked him from the bitter childhood to the wood-carving disaster to the House of Lords. Let's wrap this up with his legacy. We talked about the quotes, but visually he changed things too.
Huge influence on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. You know those famous Victorian paintings? The beautiful women with red hair, medieval dresses, looking very tragic in boats or towers.
The Lady of Shalott vibe, looking like they're floating in water with flowers.
That is pure Tennyson. Painters like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Holman Hunt, and John William Waterhouse were obsessed with his imagery. He created the visual language of fantasy, the Arthurian legend, the knights, the damsels, that we still recognize today. If you like fantasy art, you owe a debt to Tennyson.
And we mentioned James Bond earlier. I want to circle back to that because it's such a perfect example of his staying power.
Skyfall, 2012. It's the perfect modern usage. You have M, played by Judi Dench, standing in a courtroom. She's being accused of being outdated, of being a relic of the Cold War. She's defending her relevance and the relevance of human intelligence over computers. And what does she quote?
She quotes Ulysses.
"We are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven. That which we are, we are."
One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
It connects that Victorian resolve to the modern world. It shows that the struggle to keep going when you're old, when you're tired, when the world has changed around you is timeless. Whether you were a Greek hero, a Victorian poet, or the head of MI6, that sentiment lands.
The soundtrack even has a track titled Tennyson. That is how crucial that moment was.
And then, of course, there is his death. He died at his home, Aldworth, on October 6, 1892. He was 83 years old.
A good run, especially for a guy who was frail and depressed in his 30s.
A very good run. He was buried at Westminster Abbey in Poets' Corner, which is fitting, and his last words were very writerly.
Oh, that press will have me now.
Imagine that, on your deathbed thinking about the newspaper reviews, or perhaps he meant the printing press, that he was becoming text, becoming history.
And his son, Hallam, named after his dead friend, succeeded him and even became the second Governor General of Australia, so the legacy continued.
Indeed.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone from the bitter childhood to the trance, the grief, the wood-carving disaster, and finally the House of Lords. What is the big takeaway here? How should we think of Tennyson?
For me, it is the contradiction. T.S. Eliot called Tennyson the saddest of all English poets, and W.H. Auden called him the stupidest, which I think is incredibly unfair. But he meant that Tennyson was all feeling and little intellectual rigor.
Ouch, Auden coming in with a steel chair.
Right. But I think the truth is in the middle. Tennyson wrote, "The old order changeth, yielding place to new." He knew the world was moving on. He was obsessed with the past King Arthur, Camelot, and he was obsessed with his own grief. But he became the voice of national resilience.
It is that faith and honest doubt thing again.
Exactly. We live in a world where everyone seems so certain. Everyone is shouting their opinions online. Everyone knows exactly what is right and wrong. Tennyson reminds us that there is dignity in the struggle. There is dignity in not knowing, in grieving, and in just trying to keep moving forward.
And that resilience isn't about winning. It's about refusing to stop.
To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
I think that's the note to leave it on. Next time you feel like the world is too much, or you're stuck in the past, or you just took a massive loss, don't just read Ulysses as a classic poem. Read it as an instruction manual. Read it as a permission slip to keep going, even when the odds are against you.
And maybe, just maybe, try repeating your own name until the walls of reality dissolve. You never know what you might find.
Proceed with caution on that one. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Ah!